My husband made me the most beautiful Eggs Benedict I'd ever seen. He kissed me, told me I deserved it, and headed to work. But as I looked at the plate, my skin crawled. Something was wrong. I couldn't explain it, so I gave the meal to his secretary instead. 2 hours later, sirens were screaming outside my office, and I realized my husband hadn't made me breakfast. He'd made me a death sentence. Welcome to Voice of Alicia, where stories breathe, emotions speak, and every word paints a world of its own. Close your eyes, relax your mind, and step into a story crafted just for you. I woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon, a scent that should have been comforting, but instead felt like a cold hand pressing against my chest. Mark was already in the kitchen. I could hear the rhythmic clink of silverware against ceramic, a sound that usually signaled a peaceful Saturday morning. But it wasn't Saturday. It was a Tuesday, and Mark was notoriously a grab a granola bar and run kind of man. He hadn't made me breakfast in 3 years, not since our honeymoon. I stayed under the covers for a moment, trying to shake the feeling. We had been married for 5 years, and the last 12 months had been quiet. Not a peaceful quiet, but a heavy, stagnant silence that filled the rooms of our house like thick fog. We were drifting, and I knew it. I suspect he knew it too. When I finally walked into the kitchen, Mark turned around with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked tired. "Good morning, Sarah," he said, sliding a plate onto the breakfast nook. "I thought you deserved something special today. You've been working so hard lately." On the plate was a perfect Eggs Benedict, my favorite. The hollandaise sauce was creamy, the poached eggs were flawless, and there was a side of fresh, seasonal fruit. It looked like something out of a Michelin star restaurant. "Mark, this is a lot," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. "Eat up," he urged, leaning against the counter and watching me. "I have to head into the office early. Big meeting with the board. I wanted to make sure you started your day right." I picked up the fork, but my stomach did a somersault. Call it intuition, call it a wife's sixth sense, or maybe it was just the way he was hovering, but every fiber of my being told me not to take a bite. It wasn't that I thought it was poisoned. That's the stuff of movies, right? It was more of a spiritual rejection. Something felt transactional about this meal, like he was paying off a debt I didn't know I owed. "I'm actually running a bit late myself," I lied, setting the fork down. "I have that presentation at the gallery this morning. Do you mind if I box this up and take it with me? I'll eat it at my desk." A flash of something, frustration, panic, crossed his face for a split second before he masked it with a shrug. "Sure, I just didn't want it to go to waste." I packed the breakfast into a Tupperware container, kissed him on the cheek, he tasted like peppermint and anxiety, and headed out. The drive to work was a blur. My mind kept looping back to the breakfast. Why today? Why that specific meal? By the time I reached the office, my bad feeling had evolved into a full-blown knot in my stomach. When I walked through the lobby, I saw Chloe, Mark's executive secretary. She was sitting at the front desk, looking pale and exhausted. Chloe was a sweet girl, barely 24, who had been working for Mark for about 6 months. She lived on coffee and stress, and today she looked like she hadn't slept in a week. "Morning, Chloe," I said, pausing at her desk. "You look like you're having a rough start." She gave me a weak smile. "Just one of those mornings, Mrs. Thorne. My car wouldn't start, I missed my bus, and I haven't had a chance to grab a bite. I think my blood sugar is hitting the floor." I looked down at the Tupperware in my hand. The special breakfast. "You know what? I said, sliding the container onto her desk. My husband made this for me this morning, but I've already had a huge smoothie and I can't look at another bite. It's Eggs Benedict. It's still warm. Her eyes lit up like a child's on Christmas. Oh my God, really? Are you sure? That looks incredible. Positive, I said. Enjoy it. You need the fuel more than I do. I walked to my office, feeling a strange sense of relief, as if I had just handed off a ticking time bomb. I sat through my meetings, but I couldn't focus. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a text from Mark asking how the breakfast was. It never came. 2 hours later, the screaming started. I rushed out of my office to find a scene of absolute chaos. Chloe was slumped over her desk, her face a terrifying shade of blue-gray. She was gasping for air, her hands clutching at her throat. The Tupperware container was on the floor, the eggs smeared across the carpet. "Call 911!" I screamed at the receptionist. I ran to Chloe, trying to remember my CPR training. She was breaking out in massive, angry red hives. Her eyes were rolling back in her head. It wasn't a heart attack. It was anaphylactic shock. "Does she have an allergy?" I yelled. One of the other interns stammered, "Shellfish. She's deathly allergic to any kind of shellfish or shrimp." My blood turned to ice. I looked at the remains of the breakfast on the floor. Eggs Benedict doesn't have shellfish. Hollandaise is butter, egg yolks, and lemon. The paramedics arrived within minutes, administered an EpiPen, and rushed her out on a stretcher. The office was silent, the air thick with the smell of spilled sauce and terror. I walked over to the mess on the floor. I knelt down, ignoring the stares of my colleagues. I took a pen from a nearby desk and poked through the remains of the hollandaise sauce. Deep inside the creamy yellow mixture, hidden beneath the poached egg, were tiny, finely minced pieces of pink flesh. Mark knew I had developed a severe late-onset allergy to shellfish 2 years ago. We had spent an entire night in the ER because of a cross-contaminated Caesar salad. He was the one who cleared out our pantry. He was the one who told the waiters every time we went out to dinner, "My wife is allergic to shellfish." He hadn't made me a special breakfast. He had made me a death sentence. The room began to spin. He didn't know I would give it to Chloe. He thought I would eat it. He expected to get a phone call from my office saying I had collapsed. He expected to be the grieving widower. I didn't call him. I didn't scream. I went back into my office, locked the door, and called a private investigator I had used for a gallery theft a year prior. "I need you to look into my husband," I whispered into the phone. "Everything. Bank accounts, phone records, travel. Now." The next 48 hours were a descent into a life I didn't recognize. The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Miller, called me that evening. "Sarah, I'm sorry," she said. "Your husband has been busy. He's been seeing a woman, a younger woman, for about 8 months. He's also been funneling money out of your joint savings into an offshore account. But here's the kicker. He took out a $2 million life insurance policy on you 3 months ago. The accidental death clause doubles the payout." I sat in the dark of my living room, the house feeling like a tomb. Mark wasn't home yet. He had texted saying the board meeting was running late. I knew where he was. He was waiting for the news. He was probably wondering why no one had called him to tell him his wife was dead. When I heard his key in the lock at 11 p.m., I didn't move. I sat in the armchair, facing the door. He walked in, whistling softly. He stopped dead when he saw me sitting there in the dark. "Sarah? God, you scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark?" "The breakfast was delicious, Mark," I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. He froze. I could see his silhouette go rigid. Oh, you liked it? I didn't eat it, I said. I gave it to Chloe. She's in the ICU right now. Anaphylactic shock. Apparently there was minced shrimp hidden in the sauce. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a person. I could hear his breathing, shallow, rapid. Shrimp? He stammered. I must have used the same cutting board. The grocery store, they must have mislabeled something. Stop, I said, standing up and flicking on the lamp. I know about the offshore account. I know about the insurance policy. And I know about the girl. Mark's face transformed. The loving husband mask didn't just slip, it shattered. His features sharpened into something cold and predatory. He didn't deny it. He didn't beg for forgiveness. You were always too smart for your own good, Sarah, he said, his voice dropping an octave. It's a shame. We could have done this the easy way. He started walking toward me. I didn't flinch. The easy way? I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You tried to kill me in front of 30 witnesses with a Tupperware container. You're not a criminal mastermind, Mark. You're a desperate man who's bad at math. I held up my phone. The police are already at the office. They've collected the food samples, they've seen the security footage of me arriving with the bag you packed, and right now, Miller is handing over your browser history, including your searches for undetectable toxins and shellfish allergy leastality, to the precinct. He lunged for me, but I stepped back and the front door burst open. I had timed the call perfectly. As the officers tackled him to the ground, Mark screamed things at me, vile, hateful things that proved the man I thought I loved had died years ago, or perhaps never existed at all. I watched them lead him away in handcuffs. The bad feeling I'd had that morning was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. A week later, I visited Chloe in the hospital. She was weak but recovering. I sat by her bed and held her hand. I'm so sorry, I told her. I had no idea. She looked at me, her eyes clearing. You saved me, Sarah. If you hadn't felt like something was wrong, if you hadn't eaten that, you would have been alone in your office. No one would have found you in time. I realized then that my bad feeling wasn't just a hunch. It was my subconscious piecing together months of tiny red flags. The way he looked at his phone, the sudden interest in our finances, the coldness in his touch. My brain had known he was dangerous long before my heart was willing to admit it. I walked out of the hospital into the bright afternoon sun. I had a lot of work to do. Lawyers to meet, a house to sell, a life to rebuild. But as I took a deep breath of the crisp air, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was suffocating. I was alive, and I would never ignore my gut ever again. Thank you for spending your time with Alicia. If this story moved you, let your support be felt. Like, share, and subscribe. Your presence inspires the next tale. Until our voices meet again, stay calm, stay curious, and keep dreaming.